Well, hi there. So in this video, we're going to do some extra practice related to fiscal policy. This is a double bonus points opportunity. So there are going to be 2 practice problems and still only about 10 multiple choice. Let's get started. Okay, so the first question here says the graph at right shows an aggregate supply curve, and it's a little weird looking. It's flat, and an aggregate demand curve and another aggregate demand curve for the economy. So one of the reasons why aggregate supply might be flat like this is if wages and prices of inputs are really, really sticky, right? So you think about like that a vertical one, an LRAS tells us that wages are flexible. And if it's a little bit kind of slanted upward like that, that means that there's sticky wages, and that's what explains that phenomena. And maybe in this economy they're really, really sticky, right? Everybody is kind of stuck at that price level. So we're going to assume this and then kind of see what happens as a result. Could be kind of a little different for us. First, it says calculate spending multiplier if 80 shifts to 80 prime as a result of an increase in expenditures of 100. So we know that it's going to cause an overall increase in output of 400. So we know that 400 is the size of the effect, and we know that we had a change of 100 in government spending, and that's going to be multiplied by a spending multiplier to get to be 400. So that means our spending multiplier must equal 4 as a result. So it's really just a matter of looking at what's the new size of this increase and kind of working backward to figure that out. That must mean the spending multiplier is 4. Would a decrease in income taxes have to be larger, smaller, or equal to 100 in order to shift the 80 by the same amount as the $100 increase in government spending? Explain. So this is saying, would the tax change have to be bigger than the 100 or smaller than the 100 to produce that? And it would have to be larger because the tax multiplier, let's write out the word and spell it, is 1 less than the spending multiplier. And so we would say that, just to show what that would be, if we were to produce the 400, it would have to be some change in tax times a taxes and transfers multiplier, which would be 3. And so this value here would have to be 133. And so in fact, you could calculate that out and show that as your explanation, right? So the explanation, you could just say larger and then do that math, and that would be fine. You could have also said, because tax multiplier is 1 less than the spending multiplier. If the marginal propensity to save decreases, will the multiplier increase, decrease, remain unchanged? This was a question from the practice set. And if we know that if people are spending more of their income, then we know that the spending multiplier would get larger, right? It would larger or increase. And again, that's really just because the spending multiplier is 1 over the MPS, and so that's going to make that multiplier effect larger. Now assume instead that the AS curve is upward sloping with a real change in GDP resulting with a $100 increase be greater than, less than, or equal to the change in the graph above. And so it's saying that now we have an SRAS that looks like this, and an AD that does one of those. And it says from the $100 increase in government spending. Well, when it moves to AD prime, is this distance here, is that still going to be 400, or is that going to be a different amount? And we would actually say that the overall change would be less than, because the new intercept of SRAS and AD is at a lesser output, right? At a lesser output level. And it's really saying that, like, well, as a result of kind of part of that causing higher prices, we would expect there to be a smaller overall effect on the change in GDP. And again, it's thinking through what would be that as a result of this. And it's a little bit of a conceptually challenging thing to consider, but it's saying, would this overall effect be bigger than that $400 or not? And I know that it says resulting from the $100 increase, but that's because, again, some of it is going up in higher prices. Now it says, assuming wages or prices are perfectly flexible as a result of a $100 increase in government spending, will real GDP decrease, increase, or remain unchanged? And so now we have a really interesting phenomena, AD to AD prime. Well, when the AD moves to AD prime, does the overall amount of output change? Does output change at all? No. GDPR is unchanged. And it's, again, the same reason that we just looked at in the question right above. The explanation here is because we would say the new intercept is still at the same Y value. And again, we can kind of consider the graph here to help us understand that, right? That new intercept is going to be actually at the exact same Y level that it used to be. And this is the old model, how we used to model actually aggregate supply. So that's really kind of an interesting throwback back in the old days, like the 1950s, even maybe earlier, 1920s. So let's take a look at the second question then. Number 2, assume an economy is operating $300 billion below full employment. Draw a correctly labeled graph of LRAS and show all that. So their first step in any of these, when we know the economy is not at equilibrium, I always like to draw SRAS and AD first. And it does say to use Y1 and PL1, so we're going to do that. PL1. And now we consider where we'd put that LRAS. Well, if we're below full employment, that means our LRAS is going to be here off to the right because Y1 is below full employment, right? And that output level. And we've done this, we've done this, we've done this, so we can move on to part B. Assume the government pursues fiscal action and the marginal propensity to consume is 0.8. If they change their spending without changing taxes, calculate the minimum required change in spending, including whether an increase or decrease that will close the gap, show your work. So I know that the MPC is 0.8, so therefore the MPS is 0.2, right? And therefore, I'm going to go that way. Therefore, the spending multiplier equals 1 over 0.2, which is 5. And now I have kind of a little bit of information here for me. Calculate the minimum change. Well, I've got 300 billion is the size of my gap. 300 is the gap, equals 5, that's a spending multiplier, times some change in government spending. And 5 times, let's say 60 would do it. And so we would increase by 60 government spending. And so that's going to be our answer. Let's take a look at part 2. If the government changed taxes now instead, what would be the size? Well, we can use some of the things we've got here before. If the spending multiplier is 5, therefore the taxes and transfers multiplier is 4. And we're doing the same thing. 300 equals 4 times some change in taxes. And so our change in taxes, 4 times 75 would do it. And we want lower taxes by 75 because lower would increase GDP. Now let's take a look at part C. Assume the government lowers personal income taxes. They did that thing. What will increase, decrease, stay the same? Aggregate demand, explain. Well, we would say that that would increase because we'll just say aggregate demand increase because consumption increases. That's really enough to say here. You could also say because disposable income went up if you really want to be a full and complete answer. Long run aggregate supply is not going to change. No change because no change to productivity, right? Just giving people an income tax is not going to make them more productive. No change to productivity and no change to cost of production, at least the short run cost of production. And so we would say that there's no change to the things that are actually going to create economic growth. Part D, assume instead that no fiscal policy as action is taken, change in investment spending. So this is like a whole other problem. Causes GDP to go up by 200. Calculate the minimum change in spending that would have led to that if the MPC is 0.2. So in other words, we know that GDP increased by 200 and the MPS is 0.2. What's the change in I that could have caused that? Well, the MPS is 0.2, our spending multiplier is still 5. So we'd have 200 equals 5 times a change in investment spending. And that means that change in investment spending is 40. So we would say 40 increase investment spending. All right, let's take a look at these multiple choice, see if we can do some of these relatively expeditiously, get you in and out of here on this homework problem. So zoom in a little bit. My eyes are getting old. Number 1, suppose the MPC is 0.8. If government spending rises by 15, income taxes increase by 20. Holy moly, this is going to be 2 and 1. Okay, so we know our spending multiplier is 5 and our taxes and transfers multiplier is 4 in those cases. And so the 5 times 15 is going to increase it by 75, and 20 times 4 is going to decrease it by 80 for an overall effect of a decrease of 5. So that's going to be A. Part number 2, fiscal policy action to reduce inflationary pressure would be to increase which of the following? Well, what could I do to reduce inflation, which would be reduce aggregate demand? I could increase income taxes, right? I could raise taxes if I wanted to reduce aggregate demand. Number 3, which of the following a decrease in exports, what fiscal policy would restore the economy back to original? So that would be, we want aggregate demand to go back up. And so an increase in taxes, no, that wouldn't do it. Increase in transfers would do it. So B is going to be our answer. Number 4, equilibrium is less than potential. Which of the following is an action that could fix it? So in other words, something to make AD go back up, not an increase in taxes. Monetary policy we haven't talked about. Government spending, there we go. Increase in government spending would do it. Number 5, in a closed economy with only lump sum taxes. These are just an assumption we have to make, so don't worry about that phrase. If the MPC is 0.75, a 70 billion increase in spending could do what? Well, MPC is 0.75. That makes our spending multiplier 1 over 0.25, so that's 4. And 4 times 70 is equal to, I don't know, 280. Is that an option? It is an option. Woo, we're going to go with that. E. Number 6, if there's an inflationary gap, an expansion, right? That's what that means, is an expansion. Which of the following would move the economy back to full employment? In other words, what would do AD down? So an increase in taxes, that would do the trick. Part C. Number 7, an economy with lump sum taxes, no international trade. So you can see it's the same assumption we just made a moment ago with question 5. No international trade, MPC 0.8, which of the following is true. So that would make our spending multiplier 5. When a consumption goes up by 5, investment goes up by 1. No, that's not going to be it. It's not really starting with consumption. That's the issue with these. So the investment goes up by 1, income rises by maximum of 5. That one's going to be the correct answer, right? Because it's saying I increases by 1 times 5 is equal to output going up by 5. And output and income are functionally the same thing. Remember, one person's spending is another person's income. So C is our correct answer here with this one, is what we would say. Income would rise by that. I do like, actually, now I'm looking at this, consumption increases by a maximum of 5. This we wouldn't actually say consumption goes up by 5. That's the problem, is that actually consumption would go up only here by 4. It's the original increase in investment spending is going to trigger 4 of consumption increase for a total change in output of 5. So that's why D is not the right answer for that one. I could see that one being very tempting, though. Number 8, which of the following is an example of an automatic stabilizer? So let's just pick one. What do we got? Progressive income taxes, that's the most common example. Number 9, which of the following changes will have the smallest expansionary effect on aggregate demand in the short run? So what's going to do the smallest amount of change? And it's going to expand. So we are looking for something AD small, increase in AD. Increase in exports of 100, increase in spending of 100, cut taxes by 100, cut imports by 100, decrease in savings by 100. So for this one, thinking about it, the spending is exports, government spending, imports. These 3 are all going to use the spending multiplier. So I'm going to rule these out. A decrease in savings of 100 is not initially going to change any amount. It's just saying we're consuming 100 more. And so actually the biggest one, oops, sorry, I crossed out the wrong one, is the taxes one. C is the right answer because the taxes and transfers multiplier is smaller than the spending multiplier. And so this C is the right answer here. That's the correct answer. So I'm sorry for crossing out the wrong one in my haste. I was trying to cross out the spending one. Number 10, automatic stabilizers do which of the following? Well, they stabilize the business cycle. So let's see, offset the destabilizing influence of changes in tax revenues to the government. No, that doesn't sound like it. Aid the economy to move away from. No, that's not it. Allow policymakers to formulate rules flexible economy to eliminate discretionary. They don't eliminate discretionary action. You still are going to need those a lot of times. Cause tax revenues to fall when real GDP falls and increase when real GDP rises. Well, that is true. They do that. And then this last one, they don't eliminate all that other stuff. That's just really D is the only correct answer here. Number 11, assume the marginal propensity to consume is 0.75. Exports go down 10. Spending goes up by 20. No crowding out, blah, blah, blah. So the overall increase in spending is 10, spend. And our spending multiplier is equal to 4, right? Because it's 1 over 0.25. So 10 times 4 is 40. So C is our correct answer. So hopefully this helped you with a little bit of this good practice related to fiscal policy. I'll see you next time.